I got a request from Robert Thomas to do a Dr. Fate helmet of Nabu the Wise. And I was pretty stoked to get this request. One of the first comics when I started buying older comics from flea markets and comic shops and things like that was this Justice League of America comic, number 83. And it was the first time I was introduced to somebody other than Superman, Batman, Flash, Green Arrow, etc. And they were out in this kind of eerie spiritual gray area that I hadn't encountered before. So, it was really, really cool to get this request. And I'm going to make this out of some EVA foam mat for the main body. And I use some of the thicker, stiffer mats to make this fin up here. And the patterns for this will be up on Facebook if you'd like to print them out. And if you want cardstock versions, you can also check those out on Etsy. And without further ado, what I'm going to do for this Dr. Fate mask is I'm going to go ahead and trace my pattern onto my foam. But as you can see, the foam is curved. And the reason why the foam is curved is because it comes in this big roll. This stuff's about 10 millimeter thick, so if you don't have access to high density EVA foam mats like this, you can always just go ahead and if you have access to 10 millimeter, just want to order it online, that's the size. 10 millimeter, even a little thicker. Just remember, for the thicker that you end up going with the foam, you're going to have to make your pattern a little bigger. Just because of the curvature and the thickness of the foam, it won't quite fit right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've got my Drill Master dual temperature heat gun, and I'm going to put this on the high setting. Just go back and forth over this on both sides so I can try and get it as flat as possible. Once I get it good and flat, I'll go ahead and trace and cut out my patterns. Alright, so I have both pieces here cut out, and for these curved areas, I use an exacto knife. It actually has a curved blade. It helps a lot actually to get a nice even cut. And next what I'm going to do is I have some contact cement here. I'm going to apply 2 layers to each sides of all of these V sections here. Okay, now that I have both of these sides here glued together, you can already see it's starting to come together a little bit. And next, I'm going to take some more contact cement, and just like the other, I'm going to put 1 layer, let it seep in, and then put on a second layer, let that sit for 15 minutes, do that on both pieces, and then join them together. Okay, so one thing I feel that I didn't really point out so far is that all these edges are pretty straight cut. However, this one has a pretty sharp angle in, and that's so that whenever I glue the two together, it'll have it come to a nice point in the front. Okay. So when you glue these together, this eye area here is going to have to tweak in somewhat in order for this to line up straight and actually glue together. So start with the nose here. Press these together evenly. Okay. Just like that. Start with the nose. I'm going to work my way down and work my way back, making sure that I get all this as even and level as possible. Here you can see it's already starting to get some of the shape and coming up, rounding off into here. Next, I'm going to go ahead and press these other two sides in the back here together and get them nice and even. Both sides here glued together, and there's a bit of a ridge, and I need to even and level all this out before I sand it. And to do that, I have this crazy creepy mannequin head thing here. I have it sitting on a box because this is just so long that in order to get a good press on it, I need to raise it up some. And I've got my dual setting heat gun, put it on high. Get it nice and hot, and just start pressing and evening out these seams while they're hot. Kind of go at first and do the whole thing. Then I'll go back through and focus on specific problem areas, heating them up with the heat gun and smoothing them out. And already you can see it already has less of a point here and it's more rounded out just from doing that. So I'm going to continue to do this all over and get a nice general smooth shape as much as I can. Alright, so I finished rounding out the top here as much as I could get it. And there are still some ridges here where the seams are. That's okay. I'm going to Dremel those smooth. If you do better at gluing your piece together than me, probably won't even have to do hardly any Dremeling. But I do, because I'm not perfect in the slightest. And I also took and put a little bit of flare to the back side here. Okay, I did this by heating it and just bending it out. And I also took and curved these ends, heated them on the inside and a little bit on the outside, and curved them in so that they matched. Because these were just kind of sticking out and it looked really, really goofy, and also made the shape of the ear look goofy as well. But pulling that into place really brought everything back together. And next, what I need to do is, you'll notice on the Dr. Fate mask, and I honestly thought about having a separate pattern piece that came through here, and gluing it slightly offset, cutting it on a bias on the edge and gluing it so it kind of angled in, but I didn't. Part of the reason was I didn't want to have to go back through and do a bunch of siliconing there, to be honest. But what I'm going to do next is take my heat gun again. I'm going to heat up this side piece here, and I'm going to pull it out while curving it in so it'll have a nice defined curve here. I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. And if you look at any reference photos, you'll see what I'm talking about the indented piece on the side here. And if you want, you can also always take a marker or create a pattern piece. You can have exact lines on both sides so you know just where to heat and pull so they come out looking even. Just to pop in here and show you guys what I've done, you'll notice I have the marks here. Okay, but this side of course is flat and this side is not. This side I have heated, and you'll notice there is the slightest lump that starts here and peaks right here. And when I hold this sideways, you can see that. And of course this part goes in and back. So just for contrast and comparison, you can take a look at what I've done. And of course gives it more of that characteristic Dr. Fate look. And I'm going to go ahead and repeat that on this side. Alright, now with the definition on both sides, I'm going to go ahead and start using the Dremel to sand down some of this stuff. And I'm not going to sand all of it on camera. It's probably going to take me a couple hours, but some of the things I'm going to do is sand down the eyes so they roll out a little bit, and sand down the inside so I can put lenses in them. But what I'm going to show you here on film, I'm going to focus on this one area right here. Now I need this to come to a point, but this nose is just a bit much. Not only is it sticking out a bit too far, it's really pointy. So I'm going to use the Dremel to take down this point here. Okay, you can see just how obnoxiously pointy that is. On my Dremel, it's set to about 15, and if you're wearing headphones, probably going to get loud. Okay, so I have worked from the nose a little bit up to the forehead here. And doing a quick comparison of what it was. Before, it was almost as pointy as this bottom piece. Now it's much more rounded, more subtle, less obnoxious. I got a lot more work to do to this, but just to show you how fast a rotary tool works, to get down basic, large, rough areas, for finer stuff, you got to have a really good, steady hand and be really good with it. I'm not. So I only pretty much do big areas. Smaller areas, fine sanding, I will do by hand. And you don't need a Dremel for this, you can do it by hand, but you can see just how fast and effective it is using a rotary tool. Alright, after quite a bit of sanding here, it's helped to smooth and even out and take out some of those little mountainous seams here. However, this one is pretty much flush, so I'm just going to seal it with some silicone later. There's that nice little hole there, which is a defect in the foam, not user error, but a manufacturing defect. And also rounded out and shaped off the eyes a little bit here as well. And did the entire back too. Now I've got 150 grit sanding block, and I'm just going to start hand sanding and evening all the rest of this out with this. The Dremel, like I say, is good to take down a lot of surface area really quick, but to really even it out and get it nice, I always do it by hand. Alright, next piece I've made here is this fin piece. I'm certain there's a better name for it, but I don't quite know it. Where does it fit? Okay, yeah, fits right there. I haven't glued it on yet. I'm going to explain to you how I made this and what I made it out of. I made this out of a thicker EVA foam mat. It's high density. It's pretty stiff, especially on a shorter piece like this. I considered doing 2 pieces of 5mm and gluing them together for one reason, and that reason is this stuff is covered in a texture. Okay, it's about 10mm whenever you sand off the texture, but just keep in mind the texture's there. So for this side, I literally had to Dremel it flat and then hand sand it. And I came up with this by looking at this, cutting out a curve, and then just going back and redoing it over and over and over again and trimming off a little bit at a time and then Dremeling it flat. Okay, to make it easier for you guys, I made a pattern off this that will be up on Facebook, or if you want to buy cardstock patterns off Etsy, there's also that option. But my point is, this may not fit your mask exactly. You may have to do some custom trimming and sanding of your own to get it to fit, because anytime you do something, there's always a little bit of difference, whether it's from the sanding or from the heating. It's just a little bit different each time. It's not 100% exact. It's not a machine producing this. It's people off patterns. And you may want your patterns a little bigger, so you may scale them up. You may want them a little smaller, so you may scale them down. But there's no, it's a guideline, and I'm sorry, but there's no exact way that this is going to fit. Next, I'm going to go ahead and glue this on. And to glue this on, I'm actually going to use super glue. I'm not going to use contact cement. Contact cement's a good firm bond, but it's kind of flexible. I want this to be nice and stiff, and once it's on there, it's on there. Okay, so I have my sin glued on here. You'll notice that I glued it exactly in the center, along the seam, which is nice because this helps to cover all this seam. So that's some siliconing work I don't have to do. Of course, I still have to silicone this and this. But that's why I waited to silicone. Instead of siliconing before the fin, glue the fin on, then do the sealing and siliconing. And like I say, truth be told, you don't really even need to use the silicone. You can always skip that part. You may see a little line, depends on how you seal it. If you decide to use Mod Podge or something like that, or some Getso, that's more self-leveling. You don't really need to use the silicone, but I'm going to, because I'd like to just plasti dip this and then airbrush it, and basically, be done with it from there. So yeah, got my fin on, it's straight, I like it, I'm pretty stoked. One thing I did change, I did cut this down some, so I already went and changed that on the pattern to reflect this, but it just came up a little bit too high and looked a little too goofy. I thought it needed to be a little more level and gradually go back in. Okay, so now that that is done, I'm going to give it one quick once over with the heat gun. I'm not going to get the foam super hot because I don't want the foam to lose its shape. I just want to go over it with the heat gun a little bit to help seal up all these pores where I've sanded and all this to get it looking nice and consistent before I start my silicone work here. And to do that, I have some Alex Plus. It's acrylic silicone plus latex. It's by a company called DAP. They also make the weldwood contact cement that I'm always using. Another thing I have is some water, regular old tap water. And this little applicator tool has a brush. You can use this or anything similar if you have anything similar. This one's getting a little worn out though. I'm going to need a new one. But anyways, pick this up at Lowe's for a couple bucks. The silicone runs about $2.99, but you do need a caulking gun to get the silicone out of it. It doesn't come in a Tupperware, of course. It comes in a caulking tube. If you see my other videos, you've seen me do this before, but so you can always skip this. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is fill in the seams where there's gaps. And I just get a little bit of my tool here, and I go up to the seam. I just start working it in, a little bit at a time. Okay. If you get too much on, you have to sand it off later, and sometimes it's kind of a pain to sand, especially when it's thicker. But yeah, you can see here that it's starting to fill in that seam quite nicely. Okay. And once I get them in where I want it, if there's a bunch of excess or anything I think is going to be lumpy, I take my finger, put it in some tap water, then I just smooth it out. Okay, I've finished filling in this whole seam, but what I was talking is you'll notice some of these little vertical lines running up and down. That's from the edges of the scraper. You can see one right there and one right there. And there's another one right there. So to get that smoothed out, I get just the tip with my finger wet, come up here, and just gently rub it over it to help take some of that out. I'm going to need a few more passes with the water to help even it out. And I'll come back and show you what it looks like when it's dried. Okay. A couple of quick tips on the silicone. When you're using the water to smooth all this out, you have some work time, but not much. As quick as a minute or so, this stuff will start to set. Once it does, it's harder to smooth out. So keep that in mind. And you'll notice I went down the center, but I didn't do these side seams. I'm not going to do that until this is fully dry. Because until this is 100% fully dry and set, you are going to have to wait. Because anytime you go to use the water, you're going to mess all this up. It's going to pull it right out of the crack. It's going to screw up everything you've just done. So make sure it's fully dry when you have intersecting seams like this. As far as like these side seams, not a problem. Another thing, I don't want to give you guys an unrealistic idea of what I'm doing. When I'm doing this on camera, I have it sitting on the mannequin head. When it's not on camera, I'm holding this up close to me and using the tools and everything and doing it. I just have it on the mannequin head for purposes of display and filming. Okay, so I've got all of the basic siliconing done, the first layer anyways. And since this is water-based, as it dries and the water evaporates, it does tend to shrink up a little bit. So I am going to probably go back through, maybe not on every place, but on some places, and do a little bit more silicone work just to help make sure everything is nice and flush. It usually takes about, I'd say 2 to 8 hours for this to fully dry. If it's a really thick, gooped-on section, then you're looking at probably more. Depending on how thick it is, it could take up to 24 hours. If you look here, where I have, get this in focus, put a lot right there, and that's to cover where this joins the front. There's a tiny little, like, maybe 1 millimeter gap in the back. There's a little bit bigger, just because I didn't sand it down to a straight point. That's fine, I just siliconed it up. That's probably going to take 3 to 6 hours to dry. And once this is all dry, I can go ahead and start hand sanding it with some fine grit sandpaper. I usually start around 300, which isn't super fine, and go down to around 600, just to try to get everything perfectly smooth. But I'll come back after I do the second application of silicone and show you what it looks like. Alright, just to check back in here, I have smoothed out these areas as much as possible so you can't really see it. This is 2 coats of the silicone on all the seams, and I've done about 3 on the front piece here, right where it joins, and also about 3 on the rear here where it joins, and still need to do a little more both on the rear and up front. But once I'm done with that, just checking in so you can see what all this looks like. Once I'm done with all that, I am going to sand this, like I say, smooth the rest. So initially I was just going to Plastidip this. However, here's the main issue. Even with heating this, the foam itself is just too porous. And I'm worried about Plastidipping it with all this porous area. I feel like it's just going to make little speckles in it. So, despite the fact that I didn't want to really do this, I am going to go ahead and use some Mod Podge and brush a coat or 2 onto it. I'm going to keep all the strokes going in one direction with the brush so that it's all even. And yeah, I didn't want to do that, but the simple fact is I want to do this justice, and I want it to look as good as it possibly can. So I don't want, you know, I don't want it to not look nice and smooth and good whenever it's done. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and just Mod Podge it. Alright, so I wasn't super happy with the way the Plastidip was turning out, so I don't know if it's just a little bit too cold. It's like 75 in my garage right now, so I don't understand why, but just wasn't spraying real even. Excuse me, but the spray paint seems to be doing just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and use some Rust-Oleum paint and primer in 1. Alright, I got my light back where I normally have it. And I have this fully painted, still completely wet. Just finished painting it. I'm going to let this dry for 24 hours and then come back and start finishing it up. Alright, so the primer's set. You can still see the seams a little bit, but, you know, I'm not perfect. So, next thing I'm going to do is apply the gold. You can use gold spray paint, you can hand paint it gold. I got the airbrush turned on here. Okay, sorry to anybody that's wearing headphones, this thing's going to be loud. So, what I'm doing with this is I have some of this Folk Art Pure Gold. I thinned this out a lot with water and some Windex and a little bit of rubbing alcohol just to make it run a little bit smoother. I want it thin so it's not going on uber thick. And I mixed it with a little bit of Wicked Gold. I don't particularly care for this color. As you can see, it's pretty obnoxious, but it's good to add to things to get the color that you want. And now, I'm going to go ahead. I've got my gauge at around 40. My working pressure on this cheap air compressor is around 20, if that helps. And I'm just going to start by doing a general overspray on this. Okay, so here you can see that was what, 2.5 minutes of airbrush work, and still really black. Okay, you can still see the gloss black through that. And there is a reason for the gloss black. I don't want this all solid. This is a reason why I don't use spray paint. What I do with my airbrush paints usually is thin them out and then run them through rather thin and just gradually build up coat after coat, layer after layer. This helps you to create depth, and what I mean by that is, if you want to have it a little darker, where it goes in here, for example, to bring out a little bit of the bend that you put in the foam, etc., etc., you can highlight through here and leave it a little darker right through here. Same thing, you want to leave it a little darker under the nose or wherever, just to give it a little bit more depth. It's totally fine just to go ahead and paint the whole thing a solid gold with spray paint or whatever, but I like the way this looks better. I think the effect is so much better, and I'm going to continue to layer this up, and I'll come back and show you what it looks like whenever I'm done. Alright, now that I got my base coat of gold here, it looks very bronze, still very dark, but doesn't look gold in the slice. It looks very bronze, and of course Dr. Fate does not have a bronze helmet, he has a gold helmet. So now that I have my base coat of this initial gold that I mixed together, I'm going to use some of the Wicked Silvers, Wicked Colors, Wicked Gold by Createx, just some airbrush paint. And I thinned it out about halfway with water. It's super thin. And since it is so thin, I don't want it putting on because it'll puddle up if I put it on too thickly. So I've got, my pressure is going to be, once again, anybody with headphones, beware, about to turn this air compressor on. 3, 2, 1. Yeah. Pressure gauge is at around 25. Working pressure is around 18, maybe 20. And I'm just going to go ahead and, much like before, do a quick test here. Okay, it's coming out good. Just start going over the surface. Not super thick. And you really can't tell, but I'm holding the airbrush about an entire foot away from the piece that I'm spraying. Like I said, I really, since it's so thin and so watery, I really don't want it to pile up here. You know, I don't want it to puddle. It'll be ugly, it'll run, nobody wants that, okay? I'm going to go ahead and finish overspraying it with this, and then I'll come back and show you my progress. Alright, so here's how it's looking after I have done all of the gold overspray with the Wicked Gold. And it still has some depth to it. And this isn't the best lighting, of course, so I will show it to you inside so you can get a much better look at it. But I may do a little more, but I'm pretty happy so far. Next, I need to go find something for the lenses and put that in so that, yeah, I can match that up with how the paint looks and see if I like it. Alright, so I've got my gold the way I want it to look. Pretty excited about it. I really do like the way that it has turned out. And I went and looked at several pairs of sunglasses. The ones I was originally going to get were just plain tinted yellow. They're like shooter sunglasses. You can find them anywhere. But I ended up finding these that have more of an amber tint to them. More of a slightly golden yellow, which I thought would look a lot better with this. So I'm going to use my Dremel and my cutting tool, and I'm going to cut these rims here so I can pop these lenses out. Okay, and to cut this out, I used my Dremel cutting edge, 1.5 inch. As you can see, I've worn this down so much, I definitely need a new one. But that's just how much Dremel action is going on with my projects. I don't know what to say. Alright, I have the lenses put in here, and I do like the color and the way it looks. I contact cemented both of these in. However, I want to show you here, I don't so much trust the contact cement on smooth surfaces, and I wasn't brave enough to sand the lenses to rough them up before I contact cemented them. So you'll notice there's that little bead around it, that's hot glue. I use the hot glue gun just to seal it off, just to make sure I'm not going to snag it on anything and pop it off in the middle of a con. That would be awful. Okay. And the next thing I did was I cut out some 5mm EVA foam pieces to plug up the eye holes, because next I'm going to spray this off with some gloss clear acrylic coating. Alright, lenses are in, clear coat has been applied, and yeah, pretty stoked on the thing overall. Now all that's left to do is let this dry the rest of the way and try it on. Alright, so yeah, here is the finished helmet. It's been 24 hours and the clear coat is dried. Try to get up in the light here so you can see. You can still see my eyes through it. And of course the lenses are going to fog up a little bit, unfortunately. I tried to leave a little space on either side for some airflow. But yeah, I'm pretty stoked with the way it came out. I like the fit of it, I like the shape. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and the patterns for it will be up on the Facebook page if you want to download and print them out yourself and make your own. And I'll also have cardstock patterns up in the Etsy shop if you'd like to check that out. But yeah, as always guys, thanks for watching and checking out this video in my channel. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and it would help me out a lot as well if you could subscribe, and feel free to comment below your favorite Dr. Fate story, particular person to inhabit the character, the mask, the persona. And as always guys, have a great day.